In several of my videos, I have referred to King's and Queen's crown. Today I'm going to explain these terms and look at how that is relevant to buttons and badges and what impact that has on historical reenactors. Strictly speaking, the terms King's crown and Queen's crown are wrong, and we should be using the terms Tudor crown and St Edward's crown respectively. However, when King Edward VII ascended to the throne in 1901, the Tudor crown was adopted as a standardised representation of the king and emperor. It was used by subsequent monarchs, who all held the title of Emperor of India, up to and including King George VI. In 1948, when India gained its independence, the king ceased using the title Emperor of India, but the royal cipher, and by extension the representation of the king, remains the Tudor crown. On her accession in 1952, Queen Elizabeth adopted the St Edward's crown as the state crown of Great Britain, moving away from the crown associated with the empire. Hence the idea of a king's crown and a queen's crown took hold. In September 2022, Queen Elizabeth died and the nation, or some of us anyway, waited with bated breath to see whether King Charles would retain the St Edward's crown, distinguishing monarchs by imperial title, or adopt the Tudor crown, thus retaining the king-queen distinction. The crown used is of the Tudor design, but the jewel pattern in the circlet was altered from the design used before 1952 to match the pattern used in the St Edward's crown. These were rolled out to the armed forces in time for the May 2023 coronation. For World War II reenactors, buttons and badges should feature the Tudor crown. To be absolutely correct, the jewel pattern in the circlet should feature the pre-1952 pattern rather than the design from 2022 onwards. However, the jewel pattern in buttons doesn't show. In cap badges, the design is so small that the embroidery cannot distinguish between ovals, rectangles and rhombuses. In truth, most cap badges show, at best, 3 jewels in the circlet, whereas in the actual cipher there are 5. Another point worth making is the material of buttons. In the Second World War, they were made from gilt brass. In around 1950, the Royal Navy moved to anodised aluminium. Whereas spotting the type of crown on a button requires careful study, anodised aluminium is quite obvious. So where does this leave us as reenactors? Clearly, we should aim for historical accuracy. When that is not possible, we should aim for the correct impression. And if both of these fail, we need to be honest. For that reason, I would say cap badges should be Tudor crown. The shape of St Edward's crown is clearly different and visible from some distance. The difference between the pre-1952 and post-2022, however, I think is immaterial. I would like to have authentic buttons on all my kit, but replacing the 14 buttons on my greatcoat with originals is a challenging task. I will replace them, but only when I'm able to do the complete set. In the meantime, if someone asks, I would tell them that the buttons are after the period I am depicting, but originals are difficult to come by, and they are a planned alteration. On number 5 jackets, I think it is more important, though not a deal breaker, to have authentic buttons. If you've enjoyed my venture into crowns, badges and buttons, subscribe to see more World War II Royal Navy content.